Sarah forgot to end the call. Through the static, I caught fragments that made my blood freeze. It's time, Marcus. The assisted living facility is perfect for him. He's becoming too much to handle. I said nothing, but something inside me shattered completely. I listed the property for $890,000. When they returned from their conference, grinning with anticipation, a shock awaited them. Their house key wouldn't turn in the lock. A folded letter sat on the porch steps, and after scanning it, they began shouting frantically. That's when I knew they wouldn't simply accept defeat. This was only the opening move. Before we dive deeper, please hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. The telephone chimed as I scraped the final portion of casserole from my dish. Margaret's recipe, though mine never captured that special touch she had. I checked the display and couldn't help but smile. "Sarah," I answered. "Dad, how are you managing?" Her voice held that comforting warmth that always stirred both love and loneliness in my heart. I sank into Margaret's favorite armchair, the fabric softened by countless evenings of her reading ritual. "You know me, sweetheart. Just finished supper and planned to catch the evening news." I omitted mentioning it was 3-day-old leftovers, or that I'd spent most of the hour gazing at Margaret's portrait on the shelf. "Are you getting proper nutrition? Remember, there are grocery delivery apps now. I walked you through the setup." "I'm managing fine," I said gently, though I had a close call yesterday. Left the coffee maker heating too long. Luckily caught the burning smell from the den. Silence stretched between us. I could envision her expression, the worried furrow she'd inherited from her mother. "Dad, perhaps we should arrange for someone to visit you more frequently. Marcus believes." "I'm perfectly capable, Sarah. Truly. How's your business trip? Phoenix, right?" "Yes, the summit wraps up tomorrow. Marcus has been managing the client presentations while I endure these tedious seminars on digital marketing evolution." Her laugh seemed strained. "Listen, Dad, I should head out. Marcus and I are meeting potential backers for dinner." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Please take care." I heard the connection end, then rustling noises. She must have tossed her phone into her bag, I assumed, reaching to disconnect my end. But voices drifted through her device's microphone. Distant, but unmistakable. "Marcus, you see his decline accelerating?" Sarah's tone had completely transformed, no longer warm or caring. "He nearly started a fire yesterday. What happens when he burns everything down?" My grip tightened on the receiver. Ice coursed through my veins. "It's time for residential care, Sarah." Marcus spoke with clinical detachment. "He's becoming a liability, and you realize it. Your father's decent enough, but independent living isn't viable anymore. The property's worth nearly $1 million in today's market," Sarah continued with calculating precision. "Denver's boom means we could fetch $900,000, possibly more." "Precisely." Marcus sounded satisfied. "We liquidate it, place him somewhere adequate, nothing extravagant, and finally purchase that Boulder home we've been eyeing, the one with mountain views." My daughter actually chuckled. "God, Marcus, you should have witnessed him tonight. So appreciative just hearing my voice. He's completely oblivious to our planning. The longer we delay, the more disoriented he'll become. We should act while he still trusts us implicitly." The phone tumbled from my numb hands, striking the hardwood floors Margaret and I had laid together 23 years prior. Every plank positioned by my own labor, every fastener driven while envisioning our family's destiny. I sat in my suddenly silent home staring at Margaret's photograph. Her gaze seemed to penetrate mine with an expression I couldn't decipher. Disappointment, warning, perhaps just the terrible wisdom of those who've already departed this realm. The antique clock in the corridor, Margaret's anniversary present 15 years ago, ticked rhythmically in the deepening shadows. Outside, early spring insects began their nocturnal chorus in the garden Margaret had cultivated, which I still maintained. Something frigid and unyielding settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt from my daughter's call moments before. My hands, weathered from decades of construction, slowly clenched into fists. They considered me a burden. They assumed I was confused, helpless, ready for management and disposal. They were already allocating my assets, already designing their new existence over my metaphorical grave. But I wasn't deceased yet, and I wasn't nearly as bewildered as they believed. I'm uncertain how long I remained there in darkness, Margaret's face observing me from the silver frame on the side table. The house felt transformed, as if the walls themselves had witnessed my daughter's treachery and were holding their breath. My legs felt unsteady when I finally rose to illuminate the lamp. The gentle light spread across the living room we'd furnished gradually, each piece selected with consideration and acquired through sacrifice. The wine-colored couch where Sarah once curled up completing assignments. The coffee table I'd crafted in the workshop, smoothing it while she played nearby. I entered the kitchen and opened the drawer containing old receipts and documents. My fingers located the folder I sought instinctively. 20 years of financial records I'd never discarded because Margaret always insisted, you never know when they might prove useful. University of Colorado billing statements, $48,000 across 4 years. I recalled those extra shifts, returning home with cement dust in my hair and mortar beneath my nails. Margaret would have coffee prepared and would knead my shoulders while I managed bills at this same kitchen table. Robert, you're destroying your health, she'd observed one evening, watching me calculate Sarah's spring tuition. She deserves better opportunities than we had, Margaret. She possesses the intelligence for anything. Margaret had kissed my forehead. Just don't provide so much that she forgets gratitude. I should have heeded her warning. Lord, I should have listened. The wedding expenses were there too, $32,000 for a single day. I'd told Sarah we could manage $5,000, perhaps $8,000 with stretching, but she'd wept, genuinely wept, about wanting her perfect ceremony. I'd worked weekends for 6 months installing floors for a contractor friend who paid cash. Daddy, you're the most wonderful father alive, she'd whispered during our dance, her head against my shoulder, her gown rustling against my rental tuxedo. I'll treasure this forever. But she had forgotten. Just as she'd forgotten who co-signed her initial auto loan when her credit proved insufficient. Just as she'd forgotten who made connections for her marketing position during 8 months of unemployment after graduation. I discovered bank records from 2 years prior, after Marcus lost his advisory role for reasons they never clarified. They'd moved in temporarily just until Marcus secured new employment. I'd never requested rent. I'd covered increased utilities, purchased groceries for 3 adults instead of 1 solitary widower. Marcus would pat my back and call me Colorado's most generous man. Sarah would embrace me and promise, Dad, we'll repay you once we're stable. They'd been stable for over a year, both earning good salaries, both making more than I ever had, yet they'd never mentioned relocating, never mentioned reimbursement. The anniversary celebration I'd funded last month, $200 at that upscale steakhouse downtown because Marcus claimed they deserved recognition. The automotive repair I'd covered when Marcus's luxury car needed transmission work, $3,000 that depleted my emergency savings. Robert's like a father to me, Marcus had told friends at their recent gathering, his arm around my shoulders. I'm blessed to join this family. I'd felt proud, actually proud, to be the generous father-in-law who supported his family regardless of personal cost. I climbed the stairs to Margaret's in my bedroom, unchanged after 2 years. Her trinket box remained on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer containing our vital papers and retrieved our original property deed. Robert and Margaret Hayes, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name exclusively now that Margaret was gone. Standing in the bedroom where Margaret had spent her final days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something transform within me. The pain persisted, sharp as shattered glass. But beneath it, something harder was crystallizing. They wanted to institutionalize me and liquidate my life's achievement. They assumed I was too aged, too confused, too grateful for their attention to resist. I gazed at Margaret's portrait on the nightstand, remembering her words from years past. Don't provide so much that she forgets gratitude. Well, Margaret, our daughter, had certainly forgotten, but she was about to discover that her old man wasn't as defenseless as she imagined. I walked to my study and retrieved the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Thomas Fisher, real estate attorney. Margaret had insisted we consult him after her cancer diagnosis, ensuring our affairs were organized. Time for another meeting. The following morning, I surveyed my house like a stranger, seeing it initially. But instead of perceiving home, I was seeing what Sarah and Marcus saw: square footage, market value, liquid capital. In the kitchen, I traced my hand along the granite surface I'd installed personally, working by lamplight after regular hours because we couldn't afford professional installation. Margaret had selected the pattern, speckled gray with golden veins that captured morning light. She'd prepared coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years until cancer sapped her strength. I remembered Christmas morning when 3-year-old Sarah took her first tentative steps right here, from the refrigerator to Margaret's waiting arms. We'd both wept with joy, Margaret lifting our daughter and spinning while I fumbled for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our home," Margaret had whispered, tears streaming. "In the house we created for her." The living room contained 25 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Sarah's expression at the sight of the dollhouse I'd spent 3 months constructing in the garage, working secretly after her bedtime. Margaret had sewn miniature curtains, crafted tiny furniture from cardboard and fabric remnants. "Daddy, it's identical to our house," Sarah had exclaimed. And it was. I'd made it a perfect replica, down to the small bay window representing her bedroom. That bay window had cost 6 months of overtime. Margaret had spotted it in a magazine and fallen in love with the reading nook concept. I'd learned to cut angles I'd never attempted, measured and remeasured until my back ached from crawling around the frame. "Robert, we can't afford this," Margaret had worried, seeing me marking measurements. "You want it, you'll have it," I'd promised. "I'll make it work." I ascended to Sarah's former room, still painted the soft yellow she'd chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photographs of school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked her through difficult nights as an infant, where Margaret and I had helped with algebra at the small white desk I'd built to fit perfectly beneath the window. The master bedroom proved most challenging. Margaret's side retained her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of the novel she'd never complete. I'd built these walk-in closets myself, custom designed to fit Margaret's height perfectly. Her clothing still hung there, still carrying her perfume's faint scent. This was the room where we'd planned our future, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Sarah, where Margaret had died holding my hand while machines monitored around us. "Promise me you won't let them exploit you," she'd said near the end, her voice barely audible. "You're too kind, Robert, too generous. Promise me you'll protect yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't honored that promise, had I? In my study, I found Margaret's construction photo collection, images of me laying foundation in spring 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Me and my crew installing framework. Margaret in her hard hat bringing lemonade on sweltering summer days, her belly just beginning to show with Sarah. The financial records from those years told the story Margaret's photos couldn't. Second mortgage, personal loan from my brother. Margaret accepting part-time school district work to help with material costs. We'd subsisted on beans and rice for months, drove vehicles held together with prayer and tape. But we'd built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other and the family we were creating. Now my daughter, the baby who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard I'd landscaped personally, wanted to liquidate everything and discard me like inconvenient furniture. I picked up Thomas Fisher's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the contact number remained clear. Sarah and Marcus assumed they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any attention they offered. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to surrender my life's work without resistance. They were about to discover exactly how wrong they were. I dialed Thomas's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear, the kind of day Margaret used to cherish, the kind of day for fresh starts. The law offices of Fisher and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on Colfax Avenue, the type of place specializing in helping ordinary people with genuine problems rather than impressing corporate clients. I'd chosen my finest suit, the charcoal gray one Margaret had selected for me to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early, my hands only slightly trembling as I registered at the reception desk. Thomas Fisher appeared younger than I'd expected, perhaps 55, with graying temples and the patient manner of someone who'd heard every family crisis twice. His office was lined with law books and family photographs, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Margaret and I had tried to build. "Mr. Hayes, good to see you again." Thomas poured coffee from a small machine in the corner, the rich aroma filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. "I remember you and Margaret from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something sensitive about my daughter and son-in-law." Thomas settled behind his desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." I told him everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and institutionalize me. Thomas's expression never changed, but I caught him shaking his head slightly when I described their eagerness to spend my money on their Boulder dream home. "Unfortunately, Mr. Hayes, this scenario occurs more frequently than you'd think." Thomas set down his pen and leaned back. "Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? Legally, I mean. Let's start with basics. The house is titled in your name only since your wife's passing, correct?" "That's right. Margaret and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent." Thomas pulled a legal pad from his drawer and began making notes. "The house belongs to you. Period." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. "So if I wanted to sell it myself, you could list it tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision." Thomas looked up from his notes. "May I ask why you're considering that option?" I thought about Sarah's laugh when she'd called me a burden, about Marcus's cold calculation of my worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Thomas was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Denver's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price." He paused. "If you were serious about selling quickly before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less." Thomas leaned forward. "But Mr. Hayes, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing." We spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Thomas explained that he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. "The consultation fee is $200, Thomas said as I prepared to leave. "If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale." I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my truck in the spring sunshine, I felt my phone buzz. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some hotel lobby in Phoenix, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer. Let her wonder. Let her and Marcus make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Thomas Fisher's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something from the old man. This time she was going to get much more than she bargained for. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in my hands. Thomas Fisher's words echoed in my mind. It's your property. Your decision. 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like Denver fog and morning sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Sarah's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. Let her stew for a moment. Let her wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. Dad, there you are. Sarah's voice practically sparkled with artificial enthusiasm. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. I kept my tone warm, grandfatherly. How's Phoenix treating you? Oh, you know how these business conferences are, but listen, I have the most wonderful news. She paused for dramatic effect. Marcus and I have been planning something very special for you. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. Oh? We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Mom died. Her voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as manipulation. There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me. Nonsense, your family. Marcus's voice came through the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking? I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back by next Friday, Sarah said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items, you know, the essentials. The essentials, not the photo albums Margaret had lovingly arranged, not the furniture I'd built with my own hands, just the essentials for an old man being shuffled off to die. Actually, Sarah, I have a surprise for you too. When you get back. Oh, Dad, what kind of surprise? She sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining I'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Margaret, looking out at the garden she'd planted, the porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings planning our future. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest and we'll take care of everything else. Sweet. She called me sweet while planning to steal my life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. See you Friday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my study and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, Real Estate Agents Denver. The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials like I used to compare structural steel suppliers. Cherry Hills, Highlands Ranch, University Hills. Neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Sarah and Marcus were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in top results. Brian Connor, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 18 days from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of man who could make things happen fast. His testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Brian sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. I stared at his direct phone number prominently displayed beneath his credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old man my daughter expected. Margaret's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear her voice. "Robert, are you sure about this?" I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything since her funeral. I dialed Brian Connor's number with steady fingers. "Brian Connor, Connor Real Estate, how can I help you?" "Mr. Connor, my name is Robert Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen?" "Well, Mr. Hayes, that depends on several factors, but with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 10 days? My heart hammered against my ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. Denver's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your house? I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 1999, Cherry Creek area. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've maintained it well, did most of the work myself over the years. Brian's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 Rane. I glanced at the clock, just past noon. 3 Rane works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Margaret and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively, old habits from Margaret's time when she'd insist the house be spotless for any visitor. I dusted the bay window, straightened throw pillows on the couch, made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At exactly 3 the doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Margaret's lavender sachets still tucked in the linen closet, and walked toward the front door. My hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass doorknob I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door to my future. Brian Connor looked exactly like his photo, professional but approachable, early 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. He carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes went wide. Wow. He stopped in my entryway, his gaze traveling up the crown molding I'd installed by hand to the hardwood floors Margaret and I had selected together. "Mr. Hayes, this is exactly what I was hoping for." I watched him take in the details, the way afternoon light streamed through Margaret's bay window, the seamless flow from living room to dining room that I'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a beam. His appreciation was genuine, professional. "You weren't kidding about maintaining this place." He pulled out his tablet and started taking photos. "These hardwood floors throughout. Original? Installed them myself in 2001. Margaret wanted something that would last, so we went with 3/4-inch solid oak." I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing my work, proud, despite everything that was happening. "And this kitchen?" Brian stopped at the granite countertop, running his hand along the edge. "Custom installation every inch. Margaret picked the pattern, said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight." My voice caught slightly. I spent 3 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Brian was typing notes on his tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mr. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm an engineer. Was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows. He gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following him as he admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way Margaret's decorating choices had turned our construction project into a home. This bay window, custom work? Built it for my wife. She wanted a reading nook. I could picture her there with her mystery novels and afternoon tea, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Brian was taking measurements now, his excitement barely contained. Mr. Hayes, I need to show you some comparable sales. He pulled up listings on his tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest tightened. That was more than Sarah and Marcus had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $890,000. I sat down heavily in Margaret's reading chair, the number spinning in my head. That much? I managed. Mr. Hayes, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Brian's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew his business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. They pay cash, no financing contingencies, no repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Sarah and Marcus would return from Phoenix in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable father, ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Brian smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction I see. I looked around the living room where Sarah had taken her first steps, where Margaret and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. I thought about Sarah's voice on the phone, calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Marcus's cold calculation, reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Margaret's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Brian's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mr. Hayes. Let me call them right now. I watched him dial, heard him describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Cherry Creek area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. He ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through Margaret's bay window, casting golden light across the room where I'd just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Brian was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Margaret's 15th anniversary gift to me, ticked steadily in the silence. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. After Brian left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through Margaret's windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was anticipation. Brian arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with the thoroughness that had made me a good engineer, checking details the way I used to check blueprints. Sale price, $890,000. Cash purchase. Closing date, 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough, and I can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed? That's correct, Mr. Hayes, though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind. I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Sarah and Marcus's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired my workmanship and found nothing to complain about. Your father-in-law really knew what he was doing, one of them told another, since they assumed I was already gone. These floors, this electrical work, all top quality. Days 4 through 6, I became a man with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a place in Highlands, a senior community with golf courses and a community center, the kind of place Margaret and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Margaret's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. Her china, definitely. Her jewelry box, the photo albums, the essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my daughter that her confused old father was sharper than she'd ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson from next door noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. Just some work being done, I told her, hating the half-truth but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 8, Brian called with final confirmation. Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Hayes. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately. That night I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Margaret's photo on our dresser and whispered, I hope you understand what I'm doing. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. The kind of spring day Margaret used to say was Denver at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the funeral suit, but the navy one Margaret had bought me for Sarah's college graduation. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their attorney, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Brian handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. Mr. Hayes, if you'll sign here and here, initial there. Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Robert Hayes. And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000 less closing costs has been deposited to your account. I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Sarah and Marcus had dreamed their burden could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Brian walked me to my truck, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. You made the right choice, Mr. Hayes. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Sarah had learned to read, past the park where Margaret and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm. But tomorrow, I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Sarah and Marcus were due back from Phoenix in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. I sat staring at the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Sarah and Marcus expected to return and find their grateful, manageable father waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days, time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to the Starbucks on Colfax Avenue and parked in the lot, hands steady as I dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. AAA Emergency Locksmith, this is Eddie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today, it's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, sir? As soon as possible, I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address? Back at the house, I waited for Eddie in my truck, watching Mrs. Patterson water her garden next door. She waved and I waved back, my chest tight with the knowledge that I was lying to everyone who cared about me. Eddie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a man in his 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Denver had to offer. Security issue, sir? He asked, studying my front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. I watched him remove the locks I'd installed 15 years ago, the brass hardware Margaret had picked out because it matched our door knocker. These are quality locks, Eddie commented as he worked. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was me. I like things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Eddie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. Here are your new keys, sir. 3 copies of each. Front door, back door, and garage side entrance. Eddie handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. That'll be $450 with the emergency fee. I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Robert Hayes to this transaction. After Eddie left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, packing 25 years of life into what I could carry. Margaret's jewelry box went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photos and the novel she'd been reading when she died, bookmark still marking page 247. My engineering certificates. Our important documents. Margaret's favorite cookbook with handwritten notes in the margins. I left almost everything else. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Sarah's childhood. Margaret's clothes still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. While I packed, I called Sunset Manor Apartments on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished 1-bedroom immediately. We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. Month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility. I'll take it. I met Mrs. Chen at the apartment complex an hour later, a modest but clean building designed for seniors, with a community center and well-maintained grounds. The 1-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Hayes. When would you like to move in? Tonight. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit, nearly $3,000 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I caught Mrs. Patterson watching from her window. She waved again, and I felt the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Sarah and Marcus had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Margaret had taught Sarah to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room where we'd watched Sarah open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Margaret had taken her last breath while I held her hand. "I'm sorry, honey," I said aloud to Margaret's memory. "But you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." I locked the new locks and drove away from Maple Street for what might be the last time, my rearview mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Sunset Manor, my car loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more call, one more piece of the puzzle that would give Sarah and Marcus the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a motel room, functional but soulless with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. I stood holding my phone, Margaret's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought they deserved it. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. Colorado Community Bank caught my attention, smaller than the major chains with a focus on personal service and discretion. Exactly what I needed. Colorado Community Bank, Private Banking Division. This is David Morrison. Mr. Morrison, my name is Robert Hayes. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. The brief pause on the other end told me David was recalculating his day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mr. Hayes. When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Monday morning, 9 a.m. "Perfect. I'll have everything prepared." The weekend stretched ahead of me like uncharted territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Margaret and I built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile, but it was exile by choice. My choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked my belongings. Margaret's jewelry box on the dresser, my engineering awards on the bookshelf, our wedding photo beside the bed where I'd sleep alone in a space that had never known Margaret's presence. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals, nothing that required the kind of cooking Margaret had loved. The checkout clerk, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the area. "Just moved in," I told him, starting fresh. Sunday morning, I discovered a coffee shop called Brews and Views 3 blocks from my apartment. The barista, a young woman named Sarah, with purple streaks in her hair, made the kind of strong coffee I preferred. "You're new around here," she observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired engineer," I said, looking for a quieter life. "Well, you found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning that Margaret and I used to treasure. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove to Colorado Community Bank. David Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. "Mr. Hayes, what brings you to Colorado Community Bank?" "I recently sold my house. I need a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees." David nodded with genuine understanding. "We specialize in exactly that kind of service. Tell me about your needs." I explained my situation carefully. A widower who'd sold his family home and needed secure, accessible banking. David asked thoughtful questions, never prying beyond what was necessary for account setup. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous bank," I explained. "No problem at all. We can initiate that transfer today, and the funds should clear by Wednesday." David prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card, checkbook, all standard services. Given the amount, I'd also recommend our premium account package for additional security features. I signed documents that made me an official client of Colorado Community Bank, customer number 847293, with access to nearly $900,000 that Sarah and Marcus would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange rhythm of my new routine. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. Sarah remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read newspapers. Wednesday afternoon, David called with the news I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Hayes, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active." I hung up and looked around my small apartment, at Margaret's photo watching me from the nightstand, at the simple life I was building from the wreckage of my daughter's betrayal. For the first time since Margaret's death, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. Wednesday evening, I sat in my single chair, not Margaret's reading chair, not the recliner where I'd heard Sarah's betrayal, just a plain chair in a plain room that belonged entirely to me. I opened my laptop and typed "mini surveillance cameras" into the search bar. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that what I was about to order would capture the final act of my revenge. Sarah and Marcus were returning on Friday, expecting to find their grateful old father ready to be managed. Instead, they were going to discover that their burden had become their biggest problem. The search results filled my screen with dozens of surveillance options, from obvious security cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After 30 minutes of research, I found what I needed: a wireless mini camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for my engineering mind. Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, 12-hour battery life, and crystal-clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element, the note that would explain everything to Sarah and Marcus when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone, dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Margaret had always admired. "Dear Sarah and Marcus, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Denver Moving and Storage on Colfax Avenue. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad." Thursday morning, the FedEx truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent an hour in my kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Sarah and Marcus, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door with my new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home. Margaret's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I used on wooden furniture, the faint residue of 25 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Sarah and Marcus's suitcases by the stairs, their mail scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence that they'd been treating my house as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Margaret's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Margaret and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Margaret's memory. "Justice served." I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Sarah and Marcus discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 6:30 p.m. Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Sarah and Marcus would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old father had become their worst nightmare. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a man about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. 4:30 p.m. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns. Sarah always insisted on leaving Phoenix by noon to avoid traffic, and Marcus drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Margaret's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey. They left me no choice." 5:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with motion detection. A black SUV, Marcus's car, pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Sarah stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Marcus emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Sarah fishing her keys from her purse while Marcus set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock I had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Sarah frowned, examining her keyring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." Her voice came through my phone speaker. "My key's not working." Marcus stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house while Sarah continued struggling with the front lock. When Marcus returned 3 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working." His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Sarah, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Marcus studied the front door more carefully, his financial advisor's mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Dad." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. No answer. It's not even going to voicemail. Try his cell phone. He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies. Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Marcus was examining the windows now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There. That one's unlocked. I can boost you up." I watched my daughter climb through the kitchen window I'd deliberately left unlatched, her business suit catching on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened from within. Marcus entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Sarah's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name and Marcus's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across my words, Marcus reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock to disbelief to horror. "He sold the house." Sarah's voice rose to a near shriek. "How could he do this to us?" Marcus snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. That manipulative old bastard, he was playing us the whole time. $890,000. Sarah was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. He kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future. "Your future?" Marcus snapped, his mask of devoted son-in-law finally slipping. This is your father, Sarah. You should have handled this better. My fault? She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. You're the one who said he was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, he was a burden. Look what he's done to us. Marcus gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. We're homeless. Our lease expires next week. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their nursing home. Call a lawyer, Sarah said desperately. There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell the house without telling us. With what money? Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments. Then get another job. Where do you think financial firms are lining up to hire advisors who got fired for questionable transactions? I watched my daughter's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Marcus's unemployable status finally revealed. How could he be so cruel? She whispered. The same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and planned to warehouse him, Marcus shot back. The old man was smarter than both of us. Through my phone screen, I watched them collapse into my old furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Sarah buried her face in her hands while Marcus stared at my note with the expression of a man who'd finally understood he'd been outplayed. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Margaret's favorite wine I'd saved from the house, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Margaret's photo. To you, my love. Justice served. The wine tasted like victory. They'd learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Sarah trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Denver skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 2 years since Margaret's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own man again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Robert Hayes had left the building, and he was never coming back. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the suggested video. Thank you for watching.